All right. Let's get connected to Facebook and we'll get started. All right, looks like we're live. And I'll get my screen shared and Ann, we will get started.
All right.
So thanks everyone so much for joining us. I'm Britin Bostic, the Downtown and Historic Planner from the City of Georgetown, joined by my excellent colleague, Ann Evans, our very excellent reference librarian and really important, very valuable team member of the award-winning Georgetown Public Library. Because of Ann's prior work in history and documenting history, and because of a very generous gift from the Evans family, we have quite a story to share with y'all today. We're so excited. We're talking about shopping downtown, not only today, but throughout history. And we're also honoring the Evans family and their service, not only to our country, but to our community. And so all of Georgetown's favorite things coming together in our Tuesday talks for December. So really glad to have y'all joining us today. If you have not been downtown lately, it is all lit up for the holidays. It's gorgeous. And so we're so excited to have our Christmas lights back up for the holiday season. You can shop downtown, and please do shop downtown. Remember, when you're shopping locally, you're not waiting on an order to arrive via mail or other kind of delivery. You can go ahead and get your Christmas presents, get those presents checked off the list. And be sure to shop local. So this is one of our favorite photographs from the Christmas time on the square. It's a little bit hard to see, but in the bottom center, you can see Santa Claus is getting mobbed by people wanting to see Santa. So not a whole lot has changed. Anytime we have Santa down on the square, he gets a lot of visitors as well, but be sure to check out not only our retail, but also our incredible restaurants. We've got some new restaurants downtown. We've got some new stores downtown and a whole lot of holiday fun for y'all. So be sure to check that out. And you have a special connection to our story today because you have the opportunity to interview Eva Evans. And I am so glad about that because it really helps to kind of tie our story together. And I'm so glad that you had the opportunity to meet her and learn more about her story and her family story here. So tell us about the Evans family and what you were able to learn directly from Eva herself.
So this is almost a decade ago, actually, that I was able to meet her. It was part of a situation where I was interviewing World War II veterans. So I was able to meet quite a few World War II veterans from around Williamson County. And it was really special to meet her because not only was Edward Lee Evans a World War II veteran, Eva was as well. And so that's actually how they met. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail in just a minute. But Edward was from Georgetown. So he's from a longtime Georgetown family. And this is actually an enlistment photo. Today is National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. So it's actually the 80th anniversary of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And of course, shortly after that occurred, enlistment skyrocketed. Williamson County was no exception. And you actually had to come down to the courthouse to enlist. So people from Round Rock, Hutto, Taylor, all over came down to the courthouse to join up. And Ed was one of those individuals. It's noted that it was hard for him because he was working at Henderson at the time and he was making $12 a week. So it was hard for him to kind of give that up and join up. But he did, and he is sitting here in the courthouse with a group of other men. And this was actually taken on April 6th, 1942. So it's pretty early on in the war that he joined the Army Air Corps, which is the predecessor of the Air Force. He's in, I believe, the middle row on the left-hand side. You can kind of see him there. And like I said, these are men from all across the county, Round Rock, Hutto, all over, that are joining. If you go to the next one, you'll see Eva also enlisted. She has a little bit different backstory. She is up in New Hampshire, actually, and she said to me that she was walking past the Women's Army Corps office every single day. And the Women's Army Corps was actually founded in the summer of 42, so they really became a thing. And she was walking past it every day. And finally, one day she just went in and listened, and this kind of came as a little bit of a surprise to her family. And so she joins up and she gets shipped off to Texas. And at Foster Field, which is where this is, in Victoria, is where she and Ed met. And now Eva is on the right and front row at that top photo where they're marching. And then she is standing on the plane's wing on the bottom photograph on the far left side. So great promotional photos there. Now, as part of the Women's Army Corps, what she did was a lot of, early on, a lot of what they did was kind of auxiliary related things. So they would organize USO dances. She would be in charge of recreation at different times at Foster Field for people on furlough. She worked as a theater clerk. She worked as a librarian. Shout out for that. Of course, it's kind of, she did a little bit of it all throughout the war. And it was during this time that she met Edward Evans, and they began to date. He went away for training for a little bit and came back and asked her to marry him. And they got married during the war. And then that's how she ends up becoming a Georgetownian eventually. Now, during the war, Ed actually sent back several letters to his mother, Pearl, here in Georgetown. And I just wanted to share these, not to go into any particular depth. They're kind of just your ordinary letters, but to think about the fact that these were coming back to Georgetown. These were making their way from the China Burma India theater, where he flew the hump, which if you're a World War II bum, you'll know what that is. It's I can't explain it exactly. I used to know exactly what it was, but it's the whole thing where they're going over a certain set of mountains. And so he was doing that. Eva was down in Foster Field, and they're kind of getting to know each other via letters. He's talking about Eva to his mom in some of these letters. He actually mentions in this one, in January 1945, that Eva came up to Georgetown for Christmas, and that's when she met the majority of the Evans family. So she actually met them without him there. So if you've ever been worried about meeting your in-laws family, just know that Eva St. Laurent did it on her own. So she came up and she talked about how much she enjoyed the town when she got to come up here and how cute the square was. And then eventually she ends up working on the square. The next one I just wanted to point out because it's kind of fun. We often don't think about these types of things occurring, but if you're ever going through some of your relatives or friends' letters and you see something like this, it might not be an accident that it's looking like that. This one is actually censored. You can see he is saying that he is in the province of, and then suddenly it's missing. So that's what's occurring there. Sometimes you see it blotted out, but a lot of times if they could cut it out in any way, shape, or form, they did that. So just a fun little aside. This is another little fun thing. This is actually his Edward Evans's Neptune certificate is what it's often called. And you can, if you read it, it's a whole fun little thing. To all sailors, there ye may be, and to all mermaids, whales, sea serpents, porpoises, sharks, dolphins, crabs, scapes, suckers, lobsters, and all other living things of the sea. And it's letting them know that Edward Evans had crossed the equator line. So it becomes this whole thing. It's called crossing the line. There's often ceremonies involved. And I heard about this from several different World War II veterans. In particular, there was one Navy vet who described the crossing the line ceremony that he had to go through. Usually it's kind of a little bit of a hazing ritual. He he was woken up in the middle of the night when they actually crossed the line, and he was blindfolded. He was made to go through an obstacle course, which ended with him basically crawling down a plank and being pushed into a small pool of water, but he didn't know it was a small pool of water. He thought he was being thrown into the sea. And of course, he's blindfolded and was just woken up in the middle of the night. So you're not real aware of what's going on. So I don't know exactly what Ed Evans endured to get his certificate, but I imagine it's probably not that far away from that particular ritual. So this is just something, again, to kind of point out, if you're ever going through people's papers and you find something like this is the backstory of what might have happened and why they might have this type of certificate. And thank you, Tom, you very much for that. Flying the hump in World War II was the airlifting of supplies from India to China over the eastern part of the Himalayas. I just completely blanked on what that was. I know, like I said, I knew it at one point and it just went out the window.
We love that all of our guests are so knowledgeable and occasionally give us a hand in remembering details.
Exactly.
So I can understand now why flying over the Himalayas would be called flying the hump, because that's
a little bit of a trek.
And we're not talking about modern airplanes. We're talking about 1940s airplanes, which is a very different experience. Well, they did come home to Georgetown, or home for Ed and new home for Eva. And so she was so beautiful, and I love that we have these photos, but she looks like a model. Was she modeling when they came
modeling in these? This is part of a campaign by the WAC to educate people on what to expect when you're going to go out shopping, basically. So if you're thinking about it, we've been in the Depression in the 30s, and then rationing during World War II in the 40s, and then suddenly there's kind of an influx of capital. People have to spend, and that's unusual. It's not something that they're used to. And so they did this whole campaign about what would you do? You would try things on, you would try different styles and purchase what you like. And she actually got to be a model for part of that campaign. There's also the, of course, we know the housing boom. There's also the rise of the automobile that's occurring at the same time. And this is actually a letter that Edward wrote while he's stationed overseas. It's May 22nd, 1945, back to his friend Motor Company, trying to buy a car. And so, of course, it's a local dealership, so they know each other. So some of it's just talking a little bit about what's going on, how are you doing, what's happening here. But my favorite part of this is that they're talking about how new car manufacturing has just been reauthorized, and new car production, again, this is May, automobile manufacturers can start getting ready for new car production sometime after July 1st this year, and will be authorized to build some 200,000 cars by year's end, which of course is only a drop in the bucket, but it is a start. In all probability, the first complete new cars should come off the line in early October if they are ever to build 200,000 this year. There's an estimated backlog of new car purchasers at the present time and of approximately 15 million. So you see, it will be a long time before everyone is satisfied. So basically he's saying, don't expect your car too soon, Ed. But just to kind of get context of what these people were coming back from the war to, is this consumer economy where there's a high demand and not that much production. And then there's kind of this boom afterwards.
It's so funny how history repeats itself, not exactly the same way, but
exactly.
I love that we're reading this letter about you're going to have to wait for your car at a time that a lot of people are having that experience today for a different reason, but also a lot of people are having to wait for their car. So
exactly.
It's amazing how often we pick topics that have connections to what's going on today.
As one of those that is trying to wait for my car, this hit particularly hard for me.
Yes. Absolutely. So 15 million. Wow. So the Evans family was really closely associated with the Hendersons, and we're going to talk about the store Hendersons, but the Evans brothers, Wallace and Ed, bought the store from Sam Henderson when they came back. So they essentially kind of entered a partnership with him. There are formal agreements with that, where they became business partners, took on ownership of part of the Henderson's business, and then they ultimately kind of took over ownership, and then Ed Evans and his wife Eva kind of had Henderson's until the end. So they didn't change the name of it. They kept that name. And Henderson's was on the north side of the square. So you have heard us talk about, if you've joined us before, you've probably heard us talk about the H.C. Craig building. It's on the north side. It's a little bit left of center, and it's where Diva is now. So if you're familiar with shopping at Diva, the home interior store, that's the same building that we're talking about today. And that's where Henderson's kind of got their start. They were the first place to sell a TV in Georgetown. So that was a pretty significant thing when televisions arrived. We've talked about that before. We talked about movie theaters and how popular the square was on Friday and Saturday nights. That was entertainment. And then some of that went away once we got to having televisions and people could have that in their own home. So that was a pretty big deal. It's interesting to me too, so Henderson's, I think, started kind of in the 20s with Sam Henderson. And then not too long after, Wallace in the early 30s, and then Ed in kind of the mid 1930s went to work for him, kind of his very early jobs. So in the 1930s, you're kind of just finishing high school and looking for that career and a way to earn income and be independent. But World War II really kind of interrupted that for a lot of young people. And I could say just young men, but we know because of Eva's service that women also were not only part of the war effort, but also served in the military in some capacity. So for so many people, their career paths were interrupted by the war and their service. And then they went and did that, and then they had to come home and they had to readjust. And what was so great for the Evans young men is that they were able to come back to a store and an owner and a business partner that was familiar to them. And so really continued that long-term investment in Georgetown and in our square, which is really fun to be able to share. So this is a photo of Wallace Evans, and then also Sam Henderson and Ed Evans. And so this is from a photo from 1948. So this would have been just after they got back. And they had just become part owners of the Henderson's variety store. I hope you're familiar with variety stores. If you're not, you're in for a treat. They were really the stores that carried everything. And so sometimes called a five and dime. We had several of them on the square over time. And this was a really popular and very large variety store. So I grew up a little distance from Fredericksburg, Texas. My grandmother lived in Fredericksburg, and she would take us to the variety five and dime store there. And that was the biggest treat when I was a kid because they had so many things that we wanted to buy. And we usually had a nickel and ended up buying like little penny candy at the variety store. So this is very similar to that. But also, they have, I'm so thankful that we have such a great collection of materials that were given to us by the Evans family. So thank you all so much for that. But you can see here this ledger entry. Edward Lee Evans had been doing the bookwork, and this is from 1937. So we see his involvement with Henderson's even prior to World War II. And then certainly coming back as a partner was a great step, and afforded he and Eva the opportunity to build their own home. So this is a house, it's here in Georgetown, it's in our Old Town Historic District. The house is still there today. So this is the house that is at 1304 East 15th Street. The house looks a bit different today than it did then. It's got an addition to the left, and then this garage has been enclosed. So there's a carport in front of it now. A lot of houses have changes over time, but I was so excited to get these early photos. You don't see the huge, gorgeous trees in the yard that we're used to in Old Town because we didn't have them at that point in time. This was south of 15th Street, didn't really develop until after World War II. And so we had a lot of young men and women coming back from the war, looking for a place to live, looking for housing that was efficient and affordable. And so they had these great ranch style and minimal traditional style houses. And you can see this car. Ann was saying she likes to believe that this was the car that Ed was trying to buy in his letter.
I really hope it is. There's no way to know for sure, but I wish it was.
So they have their brand new car in the driveway. They've got this brand new great house that I believe was built in 1949, and this beautiful little front porch. And what you can see on the left of the photo is really significant because there's nothing on the left of the photo. And if you look there today, there's a bunch of houses there on the left. And this is a photo of the family showing mom and dad and the kids. And you can see, again, we would not recognize this as Old Town today because so many of those houses were all built in a similar time period from the late 1940s into the 1960s. And so they all have a similar appearance, similar style. They all have big yards, or for the most part have big yards. And you can see this fence along the road and this big open yard, which is just very different today. So here's a picture of the back of the house, and they have this great door at the back of the garage that you could walk right through. And if you think that having your kids' toys strewn around is a new thing, it's not. Even in the 1940s and 50s, we've got kids' toys strewn around the backyard, and this great kind of rocking horse and some things to climb on and play with, and looks like a swing set there. So this is just a great example of Georgetown's development patterns for all of our post-World War II houses. And then this is just north of the Ann and I know it as Annie Pearl Elementary. You probably do too. It's now Pearl Elementary. It's a very new elementary school, but it used to be Annie Pearl, and that was built partly in response to the location was partly in response to all of the families that were moving into this area that had young children after the war. So Tom let us know the car might have been a 1948 Dodge, but a lot of models look similar in that era. Thanks so much, Tom, for letting us know that, because that kind of tracks with the timeline of them coming to Georgetown and having all these like new things for their new life together. Here is a picture of 15th Street before it was paved. Believe it or not, we had a lot of streets in Georgetown that were not paved even into the 1960s, in some cases the 1970s. And so
not far from downtown either.
Yeah, we're not far from Southwestern, and they still didn't have paved streets in the 1950s. And so the property now has a lot of really big trees in the yard, and then you can see there's an addition on the left, a little add-on to the house. They needed more room for the family, and then it looks like maybe a different vehicle, maybe the same one. And then you can again see not many houses around because these developed over the next 2 decades, but very classic picture of a muddy boy and his dog, which looks like everybody was having a really good time. They needed one of the washing machines that Henderson's ultimately kind of changed to selling, and that was with the Evans family too. We'll show you pictures of that, but in 1958, Henderson's really started to had to make some changes and adapt. So we're going from a post-World War II economy. Technology is just kind of coming up very rapidly. There's so many changes in appliances, in vehicles, in the way that we live, the way that we work. You can see these really fabulous dresses and skirts and shirts on these ladies. Even styles were really beginning to change. Skirt lengths were really starting to get shorter. You can see longer skirts here that would have definitely been appropriate for work, but there was a whole lot that was about to change. And so in 1958, Henderson started changing what they sold too, and that was recorded in the newspaper. Changing times, changing products, so kind of sharing with the community that different things were going on and about to be going on. What they were used to buying at the store might be different from what they'd be seeing now. So 1958, we have no more Model T spark plug wires. And so that's kind of wild that it's as late as 1958 that we're discontinuing this Model T spark plug wire for availability. And then here, this just highlights
it was important enough though.
Do what?
Sorry. I was going to say it was important enough that they had to announce it though. So
they had to announce it. And you know, that makes sense to me because I can see in Georgetown in the late 50s, we still had a lot of people like driving their Model Ts into town from their farm, farm or homestead on the outskirts. That makes total sense to me. We were a rural agricultural community for a long time, up until about 2014. We were kind of classified that way. So that's pretty fun. But it was a big deal for Henderson's to have those TVs. So this is from 1952. There was a kind of a notice in the newspaper, and then again, kind of remembering that Henderson's had the first TV sold in Georgetown, which I think is really a lot of fun and very cool. So we have some photos that the Evans family provided to us, and want to share those with y'all. I'm going to make sure I had the names on here, but I'm looking for the photo with the names. But anyway, these are some gentlemen who were either associated with the store or with the business. You can see a really young man there. The Henderson's employees were a little bit legendary in their own right, and they had employed so many people over time that it was something that was commented on in the newspaper of like the Henderson's employee records and how many employees had been part of the business. And that was just a really positive thing. So there seemed to really be a great sense of family and collegiality there. It was a very popular store. You can see Sam Henderson's daughter here with the baseball mitt. You can see Ed there on the left. These kids kind of looking at the latest, greatest things from Henderson's. And this is when it was still a variety store. So they made a transition to appliances ultimately, but we'll look at the variety store first. This is from around 1958, and this is exactly the kind of chaos that I fondly remember from my childhood. Just anything and everything that you can imagine: clothing, accessories, lamps, lamp shades, toys, so many toys. And then you can see some Christmas items. So there's Christmas trees, there's Santa Claus, you can see these tea sets packaged up. This would have been a great place to do your downtown Christmas shopping. And we don't have a variety store today, but we do have stores with a variety of great things. And then there's a few different shots of the store. I like this one a lot because it shows, from kind of from a retail standpoint, there's a lot of clothes and lampshades and various things. This is all kind of fun, but also the building interior is so interesting because you wouldn't from the inside recognize necessarily that this was a historic building or that you're in a building from around 1912. And so you see everything's been really streamlined. You've got modern light fixtures. You've got this gas heater in the upper right corner of the photo. To keep things warm, you've got this kind of second story area to the back with the lower ceiling height there, and then this big open space for all of the shopping to be done. And so this was definitely very popular, and just so many things, even hats, looks like some pool floaties, and a whole baby department. I really like that sign. I think that's pretty fun. So this is a time when we're really starting to transition into historic buildings not being as popular. There was a long period of time in which we weren't very concerned with historic buildings, and we certainly didn't love them the same way that we do now a lot of the time. Some people did, but for the most part, people were looking for kind of these new, modern, clean lined kind of things. And that began to really take off with modern appliances. And so Ed was really at the forefront of that in Georgetown. And you can see this is an event at the St. Gabriel Park. And this is where a bunch of businesses kind of came together almost for like a showcase. So you could go down to the park and you could kind of tour all of the booths that were set up with all of the businesses and their offerings. And so they were really promoting these washers and dryers. And you can see some really awesome advertisements. This is for Frigidaire models, and kind of shows all of the technology that went into it and the benefits. And we're really, we all know how a washer and dryer work today, but at that point in time, that was still fairly new technology. And people were transitioning from doing washing by hand or doing washing with a much older type of model into something that you could really kind of plug in and hook up in your home, and then spin the dial, push the button, and you're ready to go. So you can see a number of appliances there. And then here's Eva selling a refrigerator, well dressed again. She obviously had a beautiful sense of style, and you've got, showing their lamps, showing these great new technologies, fingertip controls, this rub-free washing action that was part of the advertising. So these are just really fun and give us a good sense of how people were shopping and what they were looking for back during that time. That Evans did purchase the Lockett building. And if you joined us back in May, we celebrated the 125th birthday of the Lockett building. That was great fun. We have a whole Tuesday talk dedicated to the Lockett Building and its history. So you can check that out at historic.georgetown.org. And then if you go to Certified Local Government Program, that's the May 25th video. And we had a really fun time talking about that history. So that was a building that MB Lockett kind of renovated into his store, and the Lockett family owned that building for a very long time. So when Ed and Eva decided to expand their business from the variety store into appliances, they bought this building on the corner, and you can see they kind of have the flags fluttering. I want to say this is around 1964, maybe. And they kind of got a whole dedicated space for appliance sales, which was really important because they did take up a lot more room and needed kind of a different setting to be able to show those successfully. So here's the interior. If you're familiar with this building, it's been restaurants for a very long time. I want to say it's been a restaurant for over 20 years, maybe 25 years now. And so if you've been in Georgetown a long time, you probably remember several restaurants being here. And what you will remember too is this balcony railing up on the second floor, and this great kind of second floor gallery that overlooks the first floor. And that's something that is still in the building today. It's new, it's been updated. Good Folks Restaurant just opened. And so if you've had a chance to visit them and eat there, they've got seating up on that second floor in the gallery. It kind of makes the U shape in the building, and they've got that railing is now painted black. So kind of a new look, but keeping one of those iconic features. And so you were selling washing machines and refrigerators and televisions and microwaves and window air conditioning units in this building on the square. And you can see all the grand opening balloons and all the excitement from that. And also Motorola was starting to produce appliances and other products. So this building had a Motorola, it was kind of a Motorola dealer for a while too. So very high tech and very new. And the grand opening was such a big deal that it made the paper. And so it kind of had a lot of background provided in that news article talking about the history of Henderson. So we can see it was founded on 7th Street in 1910, and then ended up moving. Sam Henderson moved it to where it is now, and it's kind of Gold's was next door. And so there was kind of a lot of relationship between Henderson's and Gold's. And then you can see the Evans brothers joining the business in the 1930s, and then ultimately kind of buying the business out. For many years, it says Henderson's was the only source of fishing supplies, and that was before the big lake area was developed. And when they say big lake area, they mean Lake Georgetown, which was built by the Army Corps of Engineers. And so here we have some great advertisements. These also come from the Evans family, from their collection. So talking about the grand opening, and also hundreds of dollars worth of beautiful free prizes. So you could go attend the grand opening and probably drop your name in the hat for a great prize. Portable TVs, Frigidaire portable dishwasher, some really cool things. And then also the variety store you can see was having a sale. So they were running both of these concurrently. And then there was also a Round Rock location for Henderson's. And just showing all kinds of things from furniture to garden equipment, paint equipment, and things like that. So there was also a lot of kind of hardware store and home goods available at the variety store, and really trying to serve those customers. At the time, you could get, let's see, a window air conditioning unit would run you around $200, $250. And so sounds like a really good deal. Henderson's was in the newspaper quite a bit over the years. And so there are a lot of newspaper records and articles that we have access to that we can kind of see, everything from photos to kind of records of building and business history. But ultimately, Henderson's did close. And, this was a period of time in which we were starting to get big box stores on the interstate. And vehicle-oriented developments became very popular. The square became much less popular. And what the Evans daughter shared with me, and I think this is so important, is that Ed was such a proponent of shopping downtown and the importance of supporting small local businesses and businesses on the square in order to keep that thriving. And so he was personally very invested in our downtown and did a lot to promote the shopping. He did a lot of civic work for the community. But ultimately, these smaller stores usually ended up kind of losing out to bigger stores on the interstate. And that's a lot of what happened to our downtown. So our downtown during the late 70s and the 80s was not nearly as fun and cool as we know it to be today. And so that's about the time with the downtown decline, we started with the Main Street program in the early 1980s, and that helped revitalize, bring a lot of businesses back. And then also people put a lot of investment into the building rehabilitations, and we're still enjoying those great investments today. But these are some photos as the newspaper was looking back kind of the history of the business. And then there's some really great articles talking about a really full history on the businesses and the buildings and how everything came to be. So we were really excited to see that. It's a lot to read and go through. It's a pretty in-depth history, not only on the businesses, but also the city. And then the Tartan Outlet advertisement is particularly funny to me because if you know where the Escape is on the east side of the square, that used to be the Tartan Outlet store, which had a lot of everything from golden sweet corn to like beauty aids and beauty supplies. So there was all kinds of fun on the square. One thing that does come with being a historic building owner is you sometimes inherit some really interesting things. And so Ed and Eva, when they bought the Lockett building on the corner, inherited a party wall agreement from 1903. And that basically means that two buildings share one single sidewall. And you have to have an agreement for ownership because the wall doesn't usually belong to one building or the other. It as often has some kind of shared agreement. So if you don't build buildings with two separate sidewalls next to each other and you share a wall, usually the owner of the building that's being newly built against the existing building has to get an agreement to use that wall. And so they inherited a party wall agreement that had been between M.B. Lockett and Mrs. E.J. Talbot, who was George Glasscock's daughter, and she had at one point in time owned the property next door, and they had agreed to that. So that was something that came with the deed and that they had to deal with as downtown property owners. So that's kind of fun. They'd also, in addition to serving our country, Ed served the city of Georgetown. So what was so interesting is that he was part of a slate of candidates that in the early 1960s, they'd come home from the war and they really wanted to see their community improve. They had invested personally, they had invested professionally in the community, and they were kind of dissatisfied with how things were going at the city council, and they wanted an actual clean sweep. And so they a bunch of people jumped on the ballot as write-in candidates and won. And Ed Evans was one of the people who won a city council seat in that write-in ballot. And so that obviously caused kind of an uproar in the community, caused some surprise, but they won by quite a margin. And so this kind of captures that. And this is so funny to me. Georgetown businessman Ed Evans remembers how he, Mr. Elliott, and Doyle Lida met in a garage and plotted to overthrow City Hall's old guard. So political shenanigans, absolutely. But I mentioned Mr. Gold. So this is a picture of Ed Evans presenting Mr. Gold with an award for kind of civic service and kind of a recognition for all of the work that he had done for the business community. And so it was really great to see not only that Ed was really invested in Georgetown kind of professionally, but also personally and had a lot of civic service for our community. And so we're really glad to have that information and to know that about him as well. But as the business kind of moved forward and times rolled on, like I said, technology changed, a lot of our preferences changed, our economy started to change. We did a whole Tuesday talks kind of talking about when the interstate came to Georgetown in 1964. They were constructing that. And so we had a Piggly Wiggly, did I say that right, Ann? Piggly Wiggly. Sorry, I was like, something's wrong with that. We had a Piggly Wiggly grocery store downtown. Syllable. I mean, I might like my version better.
I kind of do.
We had a Piggly Wiggly downtown for a long time, and it was in a few different locations. And then Piggly Wiggly became HEB, and y'all know the one out on 29, which will not be there for a whole lot longer. HEB is taking another step to the west and growing across I-35, but that was like a big move for the main grocery store to kind of move out to the interstate. And then you had other businesses start to do that as well, even if not as much in Georgetown initially, because we were still a fairly small city, but you really saw a lot of that happen in Round Rock, and you saw a lot of that happening in Austin. And so as Sears and Roebuck kind of changed their model and became super popular, you have stores like Montgomery Ward. So a lot of the smaller businesses, including hardware stores, we had Berry Hardware here for a long time. You began to see stores like I said, Montgomery Ward, or like Home Depot, or McCoy's, or kind of these larger, bigger box stores kind of start to take over. Walmart came about. Walmart really started to grow, and they kind of took over a lot of the retail space that had once been smaller footprints downtown. And Ann and I talked before about having, so many grocery stores back at the turn of the 20th century right on the square. And then they all kind of sold a little bit of a different thing. But as we kind of moved through the middle of the 20th century, you started to get bigger and bigger stores carrying a larger and larger variety. And it made it really difficult for smaller stores to keep up. So our smaller stores on the square through the 70s are starting to have these sales, trying to move merchandise, trying to keep cash flow going. And so we have this really great advertisement for Henderson's. And this is specific to the appliance and TV. And so there's kind of things that you can win. There's lots of savings that you can get. The sale started on Thursday, May 11th. This is in 1972. The store will be closed Thursday till noon, getting ready for this great event. So they're really kind of setting this up for to be a big deal. Mother's Day specials, green door bargains, and then also you can get these $5 off if you get the mystery coin. So really trying to incentivize shoppers. And that was a challenge that a lot of downtown business owners had. Again, we didn't always love the square the way that we do today. And so Ed was working really hard to make sure he was capturing his customers' attention and working hard with them. But a couple of years later, they ended up needing to close the store. And so you see this final closing sale going on, and just a lot of ladies came to shop those sale prices and shop those deals. And so we have these really great photos of the interior of the Lockett building and showing everybody doing their shopping. So that looks like what I'm more accustomed to seeing with like a holiday shopping crowd. And everybody's kind of, we can see some really great hairstyles. We can see some really great coats and dresses in these photos. And a little bit, you can see cars out the window. And so, again, this is a point in time where Art Square was still economically in a decline before it really started to come back in the 1980s. And a lot of that was due to the work of the Main Street program and work that people put into the Main Street program. So we're super, super grateful for that. But here we have another newspaper article talking about another era ending. And it has this really great kind of statement: Henderson's, the favorite shopping place and meeting place of many Georgetown area friends for nearly half a century, is opening its doors for a final sale. It's going out of business sale Thursday morning. It all began back in 1928 when Sam Henderson took over his father's business in a little building located about in the middle of what is now Gold's. He moved into the present building in 1937, paid $5,000 for it. And then here's where the Evans family comes in. Ed and Wallace Evans began working extra for Mr. Sam, as did many high school students back in the early 30s, Wallace in 1932 and Ed in 1934. The Evans boys finished their education and served their country in World War II and came back home to buy a piece of the business and be partners with Mr. Sam. Elmo Sherman came back from the war and went to work for them. He and Ed were buddies in the China-India part of World War II, and they've been buddies in business ever since. Never a crossword, Ed said. Ed said Elmo is the best PR man a store could have. What would the widow ladies of this town do without Elmo? Why, he not only sells them the right piece for their repair job, but if they need help, he goes out and fixes it for them. Elmo will be helping Ed in the appliance store down on the corner. So that's just a really great example of the level of customer service that these small businesses offered then and offer now. and also just kind of a fun picture into the great relationships that people had. I really love that this article highlighted that it was not just the favorite shopping place, but also the meeting place, because so much of our social lives revolve around where we go to shop and where we go to eat, seeing people. And as Georgetown continues to grow and as people continue to love our square, that's one of the great things about it, is that you can run into a bunch of people that you know. I've heard it described very wonderfully as Georgetown's front porch, and I think that's a really great description. So we still have a lot of articles about changing times. This is obviously something that people were kind of concerned about. And then the Henderson's businesses were really beautifully memorialized in this art from George Boutwell. So this was done in 2002. So this is not done kind of back in the 70s, but just kind of memorializing some really iconic Georgetown businesses. And that was the Henderson's Variety Store in the H.C. Craig building. That was the Davidson Grocery Store. And then also the Henderson's Appliance Store there in the Lockett building. And so I know a lot of people remember the Davidson Grocery and have really fond memories. So you have this great collection of buildings and this great collection of businesses that were all kind of right there together on the north side of the square. So the next time you go downtown, have a look at those buildings and remember what a great history, not only the buildings and the businesses, but also the people who helped those buildings come with us and are part of this wonderful history that we all share today. So, Anne, thank you so much for providing that great insight from Eva. I'm so glad that you had the opportunity to meet her and learn about her story. She seems like a really adventurous lady coming down from New Hampshire, standing on airplane wings, going to Georgetown to meet her new husband's family without him. She just seems like a really an adventurous spirit and a person I certainly admire. And then also, we're so thankful for Ed's service, not only to our country, but also to our community. And we thought that was just a great way to highlight and recognize National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. We are a Purple Heart city here in Georgetown, and so we are so delighted to have many, many veterans of the U.S. Armed Services, and also people who have served in a lot of different conflicts across the world. And so we are really thrilled to be able to share some of our veterans history with y'all. We know we have a lot of veterans with a lot of stories in our community. So remember to think of veteran, and if you can get them to talk, have them share part of their story with you. I think that'd be a great way to connect. So, Anne, do we have any announcements we need to make as we get wrapped up for our December Tuesday talks?
No, I think we're good. We will be taking a break in January.
Yes.
But are there any questions or anything like that?
So yeah, if we have any questions, we have a couple of minutes left, and we will be taking our annual holiday break in January. So no Tuesday talks in January. It's usually too short to put together a Tuesday talks for the first Tuesday in January after everybody gets back from holiday vacation. But if you do need to contact us, if you have any questions or follow-up, you can email historic@georgetown.org, and then you can call me at 512-930-3581. Or you can call Ann at 512-930-6614. So our thanks again to the Evans family for sharing this incredible information from their collection, some great photos and great advertisements and newspaper articles. We appreciate that so much, and getting to have a great picture of a family that was an important part of Georgetown's history through the 20th century. So everybody have a wonderful holiday season, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys.